Can money and success buy happiness? Some believe it can, but often money only serves as a temporary mask for deeper issues. Many people mishandle their wealth, spiraling into a darkness from which there's no return. Such is a case of Rurik Jutting, a wealthy banker in Hong Kong, whose riches couldn't buy stability or erase his violent impulses. This is the tragic story of how he took the lives of two innocent Indonesian women for his twisted pleasure. Many Indonesian workers in Hong Kong were deeply devastated by the deaths of two Indonesian women, Seneng Mujiasih and Sumarti Ningsih. As a show of support, about 200 Indonesian laborers gathered in Victoria Park to offer a collective prayer for the two murder victims. Many laborers expressed their dismay by wearing t-shirts featuring images of Seneng and Sumarti. A few individuals carried signs that read, "Justice for Seneng Mujiasih and Sumarti Ningsih." On November 11, 2014, Seneng Mujiasih's body was returned to Indonesia, arriving at a cargo terminal at Soekarno-Hatta Airport in Tangerang, Banten. Her body was immediately delivered to her family and the local government at the funeral home. The funeral was held at the Sido Makmur Village Public Cemetery amid bitter emotions. Sumarti Ningsih's body was also returned to Indonesia on the same day, after prayers were performed by other Indonesian workers in Hong Kong. On November 12, Sumarti Ningsih's remains were laid to rest in the Gandrung Manggu Village Cemetery in Cilacap, Central Java. Seneng and Sumarti were brutally murdered by a successful British banker named Rurik Jutting, who turned into a psychopath. News of their deaths reached Indonesia, causing widespread anger among their families and many citizens. Their brutal and unjustified killings led some people to wish Jutting would be sent to Indonesia to face mob justice. But what exactly happened? Let's look into who these victims were and how they met a sadistic end in a foreign country. Sumarti Ningsih was born in Gandrung Manggu, a small village in Java, in 1991. The villagers are mostly farmers who make a living through their rice paddies and other crops. It was here that Sumarti grew up with her parents, a younger brother named Mohammed, and an older sister. Despite the lack of money, it was a peaceful life. At some point, Sumarti got pregnant and gave birth to a son she named Mohammed. But unfortunately, her partner left her soon after, leaving her to raise the child alone. Knowing their financial situation, Sumarti realized she couldn't provide her son with a proper education or necessities. She noticed that many women in her village went abroad for work and were able to send substantial money back to their families. And after some contemplation, Sumarti decided to give her family a better life by working abroad. She joined a domestic helper agency, which granted her a domestic worker's visa, and was sent to Hong Kong in 2010 at just 19 years old. She left her parents and baby boy in Gandrung Manggu. From Hong Kong, she regularly sent money back home, sometimes as much as 3 to 6 million rupiah, hoping to build a better life for her family and her son Mohammed. Little is known about Sumarti's life in Hong Kong as a domestic worker, but she adopted the name Alice to blend in. In 2013, after 3 years, she returned to her village, missing her family dearly. She told them she was tired and needed a break. Working as a domestic helper is challenging, as we all know. Perhaps the workload overwhelmed Sumarti, and she wanted more than just domestic work. She joined a DJ school, hoping to pursue a more creative career. Despite this, she returned to Hong Kong with a tourist visa. She promised her family she would be back in November, but sadly, that promise was never fulfilled. Unlike Sumarti Ningsih, whose life details were shared openly by her family, less is known about our other victim, Seneng Mujiasih. Born in Southeast Sulawesi in 1984, she grew up in similar conditions to Sumarti. The town was small and money was hard-earned. Due to these conditions, Seneng decided to become a domestic helper in Hong Kong, moving there in April 2006. In Hong Kong, Seneng adopted the name Jessie Lorena. Like other domestic workers, she sent money back home. Her parents remembered having to borrow a neighbor's bank account to receive Seneng's hard-earned money. Despite her challenges, Seneng never forgot to give back to the poor and the unfortunate. She is remembered as a woman beautiful, both inside and out. Shortly after her domestic worker visa expired, Seneng returned to Indonesia for a short time to consider her next steps. She decided to go back to Hong Kong using a tourist visa and look for a job there. Surprisingly, Seneng transitioned from a domestic worker to a sex worker. Most people back in her hometown, especially her family, were unaware of this and rejected the idea altogether. What these two women had in common was clear. Both were looking for work, even if it was illegal, and both frequented a bar called Makati Pub and Disco. Little is known about their activities there, but many assumed after this case that the two sought jobs in another field. They had entered the world of providing sexual favors in exchange for money. Prostitution is quite stigmatized, especially in Indonesia, so it's likely their families didn't know the nature of their work in Hong Kong. In late November, the friends of Sumarti and Seneng noticed something strange. Sumarti had been unreachable and unseen for 3 days. Initially, they didn't think much of it, but their concern grew when they learned that another Indonesian woman, Seneng, was also missing. They couldn't figure out what was happening, but they did know that both women had met the same man, Rurik Jutting. He was a successful British banker in Hong Kong with a troubled private life. By the time, both women had already been brutally and sadistically killed in his luxury apartment. So who was this man? Rurik Jutting was born in London in 1985. His mother was a nursery school teacher, and his father worked as an engineer. His mother chose the name Rurik, which translates to Great One, and was the name of an imperial dynasty in Russia. Rurik was highly intelligent, and he described himself as an ambitious boy who had a happy childhood, though he displayed feelings of superiority and entitlement from a young age, according to his defense. Admitted to the prestigious Winchester College in his early teens, Jutting was disappointed to rank 6th in the scholarship selection instead of 1st. When his mother expressed delight at his entrance exam results, he found her reaction almost insulting, as it suggested she was surprised he had been accepted. There were other troubling episodes in Rurik Jutting's life. At 16, he had to help his father, who tried to take his own life by slashing his wrists, and accompany him to the hospital. Rurik also said he was sexually assaulted by another student while studying at Winchester. In 2003, a psychiatrist noted that he experienced suicidal thoughts and was troubled by his parents' marital problems and concerns about his mother's health. Despite these issues, Rurik Jutting excelled academically and was admitted to Cambridge University to study history and law at Peterhouse College. A fellow described him as ambitious, a keen athlete, committed to his studies, and from a stable Catholic background. After graduation, he worked at Barclays Bank before being headhunted by Bank of America Merrill Lynch. His role involved developing complex tax products, and his salary quickly rose to £270,000 per year, which is about $342,000 US. However, things started to go wrong in 2012 when auditors investigated his team for potential regulatory violations, identifying Jutting as a serious risk. He described this as a negative turning point in his career and felt his subsequent move to Hong Kong was arranged to get him out of the way. His manager once told him he was one of the most unpredictable people he had ever worked with. Nonetheless, he climbed his way up to become the vice president and head of structured equity finance for Bank of America Merrill Lynch in Hong Kong. This position earned him a substantial salary. Complementing this income, he rented a luxurious apartment on the 31st floor of one of Wan Chai's prestigious residential buildings. However, despite his outward success, Rurik was deeply depressed. His alcohol use was also uncontrollable around this time, as he needed to drink excessive amounts in order to get to sleep. His then-girlfriend was so worried about his reliance on alcohol, so she banned him from drinking at home. He briefly saw a psychiatrist at this point and said he often felt down and tearful at work. He couldn't understand why he felt this way, but the feeling persisted. Matters worsened when he discovered his fiancée was cheating on him, leading to the end of their relationship. Rurik's life spiraled downwards. He began carelessly spending his money on drugs and women, flaunting it on social media. Rumors suggested that he eventually developed a deep obsession with women, seeking them solely for sexual pleasure. By 2014, he was spiraling out of control. He would go on cocaine binges that lasted for days. Once he missed a scheduled meeting in London and told his boss he had HIV as an excuse. His craving for the drug became constant. His weight ballooned, and in the weeks leading up to the killings, he stopped going to work. Instead, he spent hours watching and reading violent pornography. He also tried to find men on Grindr for sex, later telling a psychiatrist he was trying to do everything he could to get new experiences, but found everything disappointing. Due to his active sex life, multiple sex workers visited his apartment. On October 25, 2014, Jutting took Sumarti to his flat after offering to pay her for sex. Rurik, attracted to her, offered her 10,000 Hong Kong dollars to sleep with him, a sum too significant for Sumarti to resist. They had had sex on one occasion before, in a hotel, but things got too violent that she asked to end the session early and refunded half his money. But this time, he was not planning to let her go that easily. On the second occasion, the sex also switched from consensual to non-consensual as he began to beat her. The situation took a horrific turn. Instead of receiving payment, Sumarti found herself threatened by a much larger man. She was held captive and tortured over the next 3 days using various tools, including fists, sex toys, and pliers. The details of her torture are too graphic to be fully disclosed, but can be found online for those who have the stomach for it. Throughout these torturous days, Sumarti was repeatedly punched and sexually assaulted. Rurik filmed his crimes, creating a deranged documentary of himself. In one video, he can be heard talking to the terrified Sumarti, asking if she loved him. He gave her 2 options. If she said yes, she'd be hit once. If she said no, she'd be hit twice. All Sumarti could muster was a pleading squeal. Another video captured the moment Rurik murdered Sumarti. Tied up, Sumarti was forced to kneel and lick the toilet bowl. Believing this might lead to her release, she complied. But Rurik had other plans. He took out a serrated knife and began sawing at her neck. When she didn't die immediately, he took her to the bathroom and decapitated her. Rurik then used his camera to document the body, boasting about the murder and sharing his fantasies of kidnapping teenagers to become his sex slaves. He took hundreds of pictures of Sumarti's corpse, including her decapitated head and intimate parts. And after this horrific act, he went out again, presumably looking for a new prey. And that brings us to Seneng Mujiasih. In early November 2014, CCTV footage captured Seneng at the Makati bar, a place she often visited for fun. There she was seen talking to a white man, none other than Rurik Jutting. They seemed to hit it off well, with Seneng looking relaxed as they talked. Rurik then invited her to his apartment to spend the night, and Seneng agreed. Around 3 a.m., Seneng was already in Rurik's apartment. Perhaps he left her alone to get something. But the atmosphere quickly changed from what they had at the bar. Seneng reportedly texted her friends, saying that the room smelled odd and the air felt thick. She felt uncomfortable, and Rurik began behaving strangely. The last contact from Seneng was at 3:25 a.m. that day. They began kissing on the sofa, but she started yelling when she saw a gag nearby. Jutting held a knife to her throat and threatened to kill her if she kept struggling. She continued to resist, and he ended up slashing her neck, killing her. He later told the police, "She was simply prey. I was hunting for prey, and she was, unfortunately, the one hunted." In the morning, Rurik called 999, the Hong Kong police line, admitting he had done something terrible. When the police arrived, they found Seneng's almost decapitated body and Rurik muttering incoherently near her. Horrified, they immediately arrested Rurik and called for backup. Paramedics and more police arrived, conducting an 8-hour search of the apartment. And they discovered Sumarti's decomposing body inside a suitcase. After his arrest, Rurik was taken to a psychiatric hospital for assessment. He was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, sexual sadism disorder, cocaine use disorder, and alcohol use disorder. These diagnoses were used during his trial to argue diminished responsibility. However, the stance was rejected, with the prosecution psychiatrist deeming him fit to stand trial and fully aware of his actions. Rurik Jutting appeared considerably leaner in court compared to his previous pretrial appearances. The Cambridge-educated banker took notes and seemed composed. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter based on diminished culpability as the trial began. His strategy was likely aimed at securing a lesser sentence, possibly with the hope of being eligible for parole sooner than he would be with a life sentence for murder. But this didn't work for him. On November 8, 2016, Rurik Jutting was formally declared guilty of the murders of Seneng Mujiasih and Sumarti Ningsih. The jury's decision was unanimous, but Rurik remained emotionless when the verdict was announced. He received 2 life sentences. While the decision was met with cheers and approval from many, the victims' families remained resentful. Sumarti's relatives, in particular, wished Rurik to endure the same horror that Sumarti experienced in the final 3 days of her life. After killing Sumarti, he changed his out-of-office email to say, "I am out of the office indefinitely. For urgent matters or any matters, please contact someone who is not an insane psychopath. For escalation, please contact God, though I suspect the devil will have custody." This message shows how mentally unwell he was. An expert witness stated that he once compared his life to the movie The Truman Show, where Jim Carrey's character unknowingly lives his entire life as part of a TV show. Maybe he believed his life was important enough that millions of people would be interested in watching it. Was Rurik Jutting beyond help? That's up for debate. His upbringing included some trauma from both his family and personal life, but it's unclear if this influenced his character development. Even in custody, he continued to fantasize about physically and sexually torturing women. Among the long list of disorders, his narcissistic and sadistic tendencies stood out the most, marking him as a deeply disturbed individual. The lives of Seneng Mujiasih and Sumarti Ningsih were taken in a horrific manner, and perhaps nobody could have seen it coming. They were murdered in cold blood by a lunatic. May the souls of these two strong and hardworking women rest in peace, and may those they left behind find closure. That's all for today, and thank you for watching.